I call the Des Moines City Council Finance Committee for April 3rd to order. And before we begin, Councilmember Nutting is stuck in a situation and cannot attend. He's going to try to attend electronically or visually if he can, but it's an unknown at this point. So I just want to call that out before we go. So the first order of business is to approve the February 6 minutes. Okay, seconded, and that's done. So let's go to we're gonna take item 2 and move it to the bottom. And let's move on to the general fund report. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. General fund report for February 2025. We'll just hit some of the highlights. On the revenue side, one of the more encouraging things we've seen so far this year is sales tax. And attached to this report is the sales tax numbers through March, though this report's only through February. But as you can see, through February, we're only under budgeted expectations by about $14,000. And what we've seen is we're a bit ahead of last year's pace if you were to compare 2025 to 2024. So it's kind of nice seeing those increase a bit. I don't know what'll happen the rest of the year with everything that's going on economically, but so far so good. Also, B&O tax and business licenses, they kind of help front load revenue in the year as we have annual filers that can file one time during the year before April 30th. So that also helps. You can see for B&O tax, it's above budgeted expectations by about $138,000. And business licenses are up above budget, about $29,000. I want to comment on charges for services. You see there's a year-to-date actual under general government services that's only $15. That's some photo statting. But what's in the budget on that line is sound transit funds, which we receive quarterly, so we would not have received those through February. And also there's other services like notary and passport services that we're launching. So those don't have an actual yet. So that explains why you only see $15 there. But overall, operating revenues finished a little over $75,000 over budget. On the expenditure side, we have total operating expenditures that are about $447,000 over budget. Part of the reason for that is we have a number of just annual costs, such as software maintenance costs that we pay in January. And the footnotes also explain a bit too. We have annual memberships that we pay in January. We do try to capture some of this one-time stuff in the year-to-date budget column, but we didn't capture everything. We also had some turnover, like towards the beginning of the year. We had some unbudgeted costs related to that. And also the election costs related to the levy lid lifts last year were paid in January and February this year, which pushed the city clerk budget over budget as of the end of February. But overall, against budget, we are $372,000. We show a $372,000 operating loss, but again, we have not received, property taxes, et cetera, which we do in April. So I do, given that a lot of the items creating that number are annual, I do expect that to improve. The last page is the sales tax report through March. You can see the grand total change from the prior year. If you can see it, because it's a small print, it's about $78,000 ahead of pace compared to last year. And one of the encouraging drivers of that is the construction segment accounts for about 56,000 of that. So whereas that segment dragged us down last year, now it's helping increase the pace. So
let's hope that continues. I got quick questions and turn to my colleague for any questions he has. Real quick, so in Expenses, where was it? I had it right here. There was like was it the cultural?
On the revenues?
Yes. Was it revenues or expenses? I couldn't remember.
There's revenue.
Yeah, revenues. Culture and recreation. It was down 51 grand. I was just, do you have any indications? Obviously, this is Feb, not March. Maybe some things catch up.
Yeah, so the actual was 51,820, so it was under expected budget expectations by about 27,000, and a lot of that is just some of that seasonal. So like basketball leagues, adult softball leagues, those just haven't happened yet. So part of that budget reflects those programs, but the actuals they haven't occurred yet. So it's more of a timing issue.
Okay. And then on the red light cameras, you've probably seen the March numbers. I know you gave us the sales tax, but we know that it's going to be a diminishing process of revenue from that as people create good habits. Is that March seeming to give the same indication, or is it a rebound?
I haven't actually seen March yet, so I've seen through February. I would say it has been trending that way, but some months I think generate more revenue than others, so it's still a bit early in the year.
I think a lot of people this time last year were being forced to go back to work too, so there might have been some of that as well from COVID. And then the only thing I would say is it's great to see on the construction, but keep an eye on it based on the news today. Yeah, that seems to be a promising sign, at least for now.
Yeah.
Councilmember Harris, do you have any questions?
I get my own mic today. Yeah, really quick. When you say turnover, you mean staff?
Yeah, so we had, as it's known, we've had a few layoffs at that time, but we also had a number of people, maybe 3 or 4 additional people leave for other positions elsewhere. So it's both involuntary and voluntary.
I've been warned about interrupting, but I cut people off because it's just a shorthand. So when you say turnover, I mean, okay, that's how I interpret it. I ask this every year, but is there no way to provide some kind of smoothing for these? It's just something to think about because we do have these one-time costs that hit every year. And so I just think it would be better if there was some way to make it. It's like when you're on the council, you just sort of have to know. You understand what I mean?
So as far as
that there are these, certain months of the year and so forth, and to get a sense of the actual cash flow and what to be concerned about and not.
Yeah, and so that's what we did with year-to-date actual. I guess the question is how granular I need to get. So if you, for example, look at the property tax line, you can see the year-to-date budget is 88,000. So what we had done in the past through last year was, well, we'll just make it 1/12. Well, we're not doing that. Like with property tax, we're basing it on what percentage we usually have through February, so that it matches up with expectations.
Yeah, no, it's like, that's super great, and it's just my, ongoing nudge, however you want to, I mean it with love. The last thing is, so when a new business opens, how long does it take before it shows up on your radar?
I mean, as far as business licenses, or
I mean, like sales tax revenue, meaning like those guys on Kent Des Moines Road that just opened.
okay, so there's a 2-month lag between when they pay their sales tax or when it's earned. So let's say they have transactions in January, we see that show up in March. So we get it from the state 2 months after it's been earned.
Okay, but since we get like quarterly reports, we might expect some good news in June, perhaps? I'm just trying to find the impact of, just,
Oh, okay.
just dying to get a sense of what the impact of.
Yeah, so, 2025 would show up mostly in the second quarter because January would be showing up at the tail end of the first quarter report.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you, sir.
Let's move on to let's move on to the long-range financial plan and development impact analysis.
This is an item that you have maybe heard a little bit about, but previously has been to the Economic Development Committee. It went to them at the end of January, and then again last week. We're bringing it to this committee for any input or questions, and then if this group is supportive as well, it's slated to go before the council next Thursday. This is in response to really a lot of the feedback we got during the budget cycle about the need for really long-range financial planning. Jeff does a great job with the budget, but there's also sort of this like longer-term picture that we can take a look at. So the agenda memo that was in the packet kind of gives you a sense of what all is included. There's really two components. The first one is the long-range financial plan, which really is looking at a 10-year financial forecast. Also, by using this firm, we get the benefit of them seeing other revenue sources other cities may be using that we're not leveraging enough, or practices they see elsewhere. So this will also include some recommendations for things the council may want to consider. And then the second component is the development options analysis, which really is a interactive model that staff can use that takes a look at how a parcel of land develops and what that means for our revenue and expenditures. So it'll look at what a potential land use would be. It will use some analysis on what, if it goes single family residential, here's what it costs typically to serve a neighborhood. Here's the revenue that'll come from them, both one time and recurring. And so it allows you to sort of look at different land uses through the fiscal lens. So we think this will be really helpful. So the packet has the information. We're splitting the cost between the development fund and the general fund as appropriate. We can cover this in the budget, and I think it'll provide a lot of valuable information, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
I have a couple questions. So I think getting a 10-year plan and trying to identify new revenue sources in this day and age, because nobody's going to approve an $8 million levy to counter what we really need. So it's going to be pieces and parts. So I have no problem with the long-range financial plan. I had the question of the development option analysis, which I was very interested in. I loved it because it was something that I asked for. Like, let's find out what a piece of land can bring us in revenue, what it cost us, and so forth. Will this tool be able to like assess what a neighborhood costs us? Like, we have 9 neighborhoods where we can see where our costs are and stuff like that, and those kind of things where we might get a little bit more specific. It might be if we were to develop the downtown, it would make X number of dollars, but it only costs us Y.
Yeah. I would say yes and no. So yes, it will answer at like a broad level.
Okay.
I don't think we'll be able to like isolate it's less set up to isolate an existing neighborhood and more set up to look at future land use.
Okay.
And so it'll look at a lot of averages, like on average, what does a single family neighborhood cost us? On average, what does retail cost us? So it'll sort of look again at sort of the high level, what different uses cost and bring in. It won't, someone at the other committee last week asked, well, will we be able to plug in like a specific land use proposal? Like, let's say a developer brings in a proposal and says, I want to build 300 apartments and 15,000 square feet of commercial. I don't think the model will go quite that granular, but it will allow us to get a sense of what multifamily mixed use brings in. So I feel like that sort of answers.
Give us an average so we can say, okay, the project's this big, most likely it would bring in, based on those averages, this amount of dollars, and it would probably cost us in services and utilities and some of the other things this much.
Yeah, I'd say it's more of a tool to help the council in decision making about land use than a tool that we would like base our budget off of.
Well, I agree. It was interesting, and when I read it, that's why I asked the question is, could you almost get specific to, I'm going to say regions of the city or neighborhoods of the city, is all the way I asked the question. Councilmember Harris, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. I already expressed my feelings about the whole 9 neighborhood thing. I don't think they're organic, and I would hope that whoever does this analysis I'm always worried that basically people look at a chart and it anchors them. into that thing. Does that make sense? Rather than just looking at the thing, because the city is just, those neighborhoods are not necessarily where the stuff is.
Yeah, I don't think this study will look at those 9 neighborhoods. Again, it's not looking super granular. It's looking at what does an average single-family home cost us. Again, it's more high level than that.
You took a certain amount of pointed questioning yesterday regarding the strategic plan. Well done to you. My concern is more sequencing. You know, if I were emperor, I would make this financial analysis first and then move down from there. I think that the order, because you're doing a lot of stuff. You're doing this, the strategic plan thing, the comp plan, and I think the sequencing kind of matters. For what it's worth, it would be, the funny thing about the financial analysis is that it's somewhat aspirational. You know, you can build all the commercial space you want, but you know, that's nothing to say that it will be filled or the quality of the. I would hope that they would also take a look at like the business park, which it's a question of efficiency because it's port-owned property. It would be good to have at least some numbers. You and I have discussed that the private development on the other side of the street is far more efficient in terms of municipal, and we should at least have those numbers. I think that's, oh yeah, and one last thing regarding redevelopment. Thank you, Councilmember Oxiger and I had that dashboard thing with Skip. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it was pretty eye-popping. And the reason that I advocate so much about the port package updates is that a lot of the port package homes, I mean, that's middle housing. And somehow that stock has to be nurtured. And I'm just, in this analysis, I'm just trying to think about how much, how much of it we can, how much of not just building new housing, but also how much of the existing stuff we can preserve and maximize its value. And boy, am I vague. Thank you so much.
I want to address the first 2 points. On sequencing, I absolutely hear what you're saying on that. In an ideal world, the strategic plan would wait a little bit, but I think we've heard a lot from the community, this desire to sort of start this process. This financial analysis will be done prior to, I think, the strategic plan wrapping up, so it will allow you to be informed by it at a high level. So I think that's positive. And then as it relates to the model and port-owned land, when I spoke to FCS, that land use model will include a way to capture whether or not a property is tax exempt or not. And so we will be able to sort of take a look at those business parks and get a sense of what revenues they generate under their conditions.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on, I would say that about any land, because we have a surprising amount of tax exempt property and nonprofit, and they're all, super worthy and everything, but even a lot of buildings that are private, they're not revenue generating kind of things. And anyway, thank you.
That can be added to the strategic plan.
Great.
And incorporated in any way or capacity you see fit.
Great. It'll be on your agenda next week.
All right. Then we're going to move on to the draft of the Des Moines investment policy.
Okay, so one of the projects we have in finance this year is really to go through various policies and updating where needed, because these things tend to age. fall out of date. The investment policy actually is memorialized in the municipal code. It's about 30 years old. It was
Thank you.
passed in 1995. Not that it's a bad policy, but it's always good to keep up with the times. So we have worked on a draft of a revised policy, and I just wanted to touch on the areas where it differs from what's in the code. And we would be passed, if this were to be adopted by council, it would be by resolution, so we'd probably take the policy out of the code, because I think back then they put all their admin policies in the code where they don't necessarily need to be. And I'll touch on that again. But the purpose of the policy, as the policy states, is to establish investment objectives and parameters necessary to safeguard public funds entrusted to the City of Des Moines, to articulate City Council's intent for the governance over the City of Des Moines' investments, to communicate clear policy and strategy guidelines for the City of Des Moines investment administration, and to demonstrate to citizens, taxpayers, and voters a transparent and accountable stewardship plan. So I just want to run through, hopefully it won't take too long, what's new in this policy as opposed to the old policy. Okay, so first of all, the scope. The revised policy reflects our current accounting practices. It references a pooled basis of which the investments would be allocated across funds. That pooling, we have a fund that is pooled cash and investments, which we did not have before our accounting system implementation. So we had a change of accounting there, which is reflected in the revised policy. Authority to invest, I'm just apologizing, includes a requirement for training, so that ensures that staff keep up with current practices and keep their knowledge fresh, and provides guidance for external manager that would be engaged to assist in management of investments. So we don't have that. We don't know if we need that, but maybe in the future, if we engage somebody, there's guidance in the policy.
Really quick, can you talk about the training? It's is this something annually, or it's you guys are reading investment journals? What's entailed in that? Just real quick.
The training that I've had, a lot of the times it's provided by our broker, so they'll have so like information about public investing, information about bonds, et cetera. And then even if, like, next week I'm going to the Washington Public Treasurers Association conference, our broker will probably be there putting a seminar on. But it's also, we're also sending Eric Mandelis, our financial operations manager, to one of these seminars. So he's aware of, like, good investing, how, cities, are
That's
required.
Great. You're making
So,
the team stronger. That's
yeah.
what I'm after.
okay.
Okay.
Prohibited investments. So this is really where you want to see the age of the old policy. When that policy was adopted, there was no such thing as cryptocurrency. And we had a council member, I think a few years back, who wanted us to invest in cryptocurrency. It is against state law to do so, so that is captured in the revised policy. The current policy in the code doesn't say what's prohibited. It just says you can invest in this. But the revised policy says you can invest in this, you can't invest in that. So it explicitly states this is prohibited. And when something's prohibited, it's too risky, because what we're trying to do is primarily keep taxpayer funds safe. Then second priority is liquidity, make sure we have enough liquidity to operate. And then earning a yield is the third priority. So those other two take precedence.
Wouldn't want to explain why $7 million just disappeared.
Right, into crypto. Authorized financial dealers and institutions. The new policy expands upon what's required by the current policy. And attached in the packet, there's a questionnaire. So the old policy pretty much required financial statements and some licensing. The questionnaire that they had to fill out is more comprehensive. They have to have current securities-related licensing, proof of registration and licenses held with the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, proof of registration with the State of Washington Securities Division, provide current active municipal references, and certification of having read the city's current investment policy. So there's more required to basically act on our behalf than there is in the current policy in the code. Diversification, there's a new schedule of thresholds. So the diversification of our investments, the old policies, or the current policy states that, quote, no more than 25% of the City of Des Moines' total investment portfolio is invested in a single security type or with a single financial institution. The new policy has a schedule, and honestly, it's a little more comprehensive. It has the LGIP, the state local government investment pool. We can't exceed 100% of our investment, so it's a pretty high threshold. I don't know how we get it to that. And it's the same with the Treasury securities and government-sponsored agency securities, and that's really where we invest anyway. For the government-sponsored agency securities, it says 40% per issuer.
Safest options, but
Right.
with the lowest return,
But it does go on to address other investments like corporate notes, commercial paper. We'd be limited to how much we can invest in those if we were to invest in those. We don't typically do, but those are captured in there. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, I was interrupting you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So gold coins are okay, and I'm not being, I'm actually surprised that the prohibitive uses are not more extensive. I'm not being flip here, but just, I don't know, maybe it's maybe it's a non-issue, but I assume it's not a problem, but I'm just curious what the possibilities. I mean, we actually could purchase, when you say corporate notes, I mean, it's legally possible for us to, invest in NVIDIA or something like that. I mean,
So
and don't raise any pulses. I'm just trying to get a sense of really what's legally allowable. And if it's too long a thing here,
So what's prohibited in general would be what's high risk. So, because again, we want to keep the taxpayer fund safe. So I haven't looked specifically at gold coins.
I'm not.
That.
No, I'm hearing platinum is doing great too.
Right.
But the other thing is just if I go and I read the RCW on pooled accounts, is it pretty self-explanatory? That caught my attention. Just
As far as our accounting practice.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be in the RCW, but it's a practice where we have one fund, and that's kind of where we house our cash for the city, our investments for the city. It's on the books, but it's not in our reports, but then we take that, and then that value is just allocated out. So it's just really an accounting practice. Instead of just saying, well, this fund has this much cash, and then we track it all separately, track it all here, and then it's allocated out across all the funds.
Okay, I'll just read the thing and I'll
401k.
let you carry on.
All right, keep going.
Maximum maturities. The first line says the lesser of 15% or $10 million of the portfolio at the time of investment will be comprised of investments in the LGIP and or maturing within 6 months. We're going to strike that because that would mean we'd have to move a lot of money out of the LGIP into our key bank account, and that would really just limit our ability to earn interest. And that was just one that we're going to remove after discussing that with staff today. Aside from that, the revised policy changes the structure of what maturities that we would take on. So the current policy states no more, wrong line, more than 18 months. And so that's talk about being vague. That's kind of vague. It's like, well, as long as it's more than 18 months, would it be stupid to invest in something for 7 years? So we don't want to lock our money up that long. So the new revised policy said we'd have an average not to exceed 3.5 years. But basically, we won't invest, our investment in our securities won't exceed 5 years. So that we would maintain a 3.5 year average, hopefully, and we're not going to invest in anything over 5 years long. Performance measures, and we're almost getting to the end. Performance measures. So the current policy uses the 6-month U.S. Treasury bill rate and average federal funds rate as a performance measure. This policy would change it to LGIP yield rate. And if you're curious, the LGIP yield rate is 4.4%. The 6-month U.S. Treasury bill is 4.23%. Federal funds rate is 4.33%. Our current portfolio at the end of February was at 3.7. But it's important to remember that we're always going to be trailing or ahead, depending on what interest rates do. So our portfolio having 3.7%, we would have killed for that like 3 years ago. A lot of our investments that were pandemic era that were earning about 0.5%, we've shed all of those. So we've been up on the upswing. And it's kind of like, you know, when you buy gas, you might pay $4 a gallon for gas, and then the price of gas might drop the next day. Or it might, and then the next day after that, it might skyrocket, but you're invested in what you've bought. So 3.7 compared to 4.4, we're doing okay. LGIP is practical for us to use, for cities to use, in my opinion, because we're either going to put it in the investment pool or we're going to invest it elsewhere. And so that's really what we compare against, is how well would we be doing in the investment pool? Can we do better somewhere else? And so that makes it a very practical performance measure. Downgraded securities is the next one. It's not addressed in the current investment policy. These would be securities like bonds where maybe we buy AAA bonds and then they're downgraded to AA bonds. We haven't experienced that, but essentially what it would say is the finance director and probably along with the investment advisor would recommend what action to take within 30 days. So if that were to happen, I'd probably call our investment broker and say, hey, what do we do?
Yeah.
What do you advise?
Something profitable.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Reporting, the revised policy complies with the RCW, which the current one actually doesn't. So RCW requires monthly reports to council of our transactions, and then quarterly reports that are more encompassing of the whole portfolio. We actually do that monthly anyway, starting last year. So we wouldn't really have a quarterly report. We would just be giving you essentially a quarterly report every month. And then finally, investment strategy, the revised policy takes the position we're not going to be day traders. We're not going to buy one thing, you know, too low today and then sell too high tomorrow and engage in that kind of activity. And then portfolio segmenting is also described. The segments would be the safety segment, the liquidity segment, and the yield segment of our portfolio, which again is just our priorities: safety, liquidity, then yield. For example, liquidity would probably be our LGIP investment, and then and our key bank. So anyway, so that's a lot of. It's a bit more comprehensive than what's in the code, but we'd like to move forward with the draft if the committee.
Yeah, I'll defer to you in a second, Councilmember Harris. The only feedback I had is, so I think what would help is when you bring this before council, the policy, I noticed on your document, you had the edits and changes. I think
Okay.
it was beneficial when we were looking at the comprehensive plan. I found that more useful to see what was changed and what wasn't. So I could see the differences before, you know, so every of the council members had that to evaluate before we.
Okay, so I have the original with the changes.
But I commend you on your strong work here. I think, you know, this is important capacity. Obviously, with the money we have, and we want to make as much money as we can safely.
Right.
And I think you've definitely created a policy that reiterates that, and that would be my mindset too. So with that, I hand it over to Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. And first of all, just, you know, in the last 12, 18 months, you're already, the level of information the council receives about our investments is so far above where it used to be. So just as a matter of just de facto practice, yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. So just take anything, just a couple of quick things. As far as the buy and hold, that's, I mean, that's very prudent to me. I'm just struck by how some of our sister cities take exactly the opposite approach, it seems. Is that not the case? I mean, they talk about their, you know, moving money around and so forth, but, you know, you have to have money, I guess, to move around. The only thing, just where you mentioned, like having a policy if a rating is downgraded,
Right.
is there perhaps some other kind of formalized warning light should an investment yield or return change that, you know, away from what the council originally approved, or just, you know, I mean, I'm not, again, I gave you the compliment up front because I know, I know you would provide that warning as a matter of, you know, just good practice, but I mean, I'm just asking if it's something to think about. Is there a possible case where it should automatically go before the council's attention if?
Yeah, so we do get, when there's an event related to an investment, our safekeeper bank is BNY Mellon. So when there's an event that's related to an investment, we're notified. We haven't had anything downgraded so far because it tends to be like federal government stuff. I'm not sure if I'd have to come to council or not because the authority has been delegated to me by council for my judgment, but I would probably make council aware. And maybe I would still bring it to council just as a good course of action that everybody's informed. So.
Yeah, I knew it was a tricky question.
Yeah.
I'm just, you know, and don't take it, I'm just thinking just because of some insanity, the LGIP drops from 5 to 1.5 or
Right.
some, that, my mind always goes to edge cases and people think I'm, you know, but I'm just trying to think about some kind of just guardrail, and I think that's about it. Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to the ARPA money.
Okay, this won't take long. So April not only is the month that we receive our first distribution of property tax, it's also the month where we file our annual report to the Department of Treasury on our ARPA expenditures and obligations. And essentially, according to the schedule, you know, I've provided, you can see the remaining funds are for the senior center roof replacement for $80,000. That was obligated before December 31st, 2024. Everything else is expended. We will be filing that report this month. We did get an email from the Department of Treasury and even the GFOA distributed a comment about this, that we received this email, everybody did. It was rather terse, saying that we're going to vigorously review the obligations at 12/31/2024, and you know the takeaway is they're probably going to try to claw back anything they can. Does anybody work for the Department of Treasury anymore, or is it just one person sending angry emails? I don't know, but I think we are, as a result of that situation, we're going to be very specific in the report for each project. This is how it was spent. This is how it complies with the grant agreement. So I'm not really concerned about losing any money at all, but we're going to make sure that we have all of our bases covered.
So, quick question, obviously, the latest state audit, they were looking at the money at least through,
Right.
I think it was 2023,
Mm-hmm.
and they thought you were definitely within compliance, and
Right.
actually, I think they were pretty impressed.
Right.
Any of that assist in this, when you gotta fill it, like you can submit that additional, or would they incorporate that in their analysis, or did they keep themselves completely separate?
Well, I think if the federal government was to say we were out of compliance, that we would use that as evidence to say, no, we've been audited.
Yeah.
You know, so that would be a hard argument to make that we weren't in compliance. And then secondarily, it's a hard argument to make because there's so few restrictions on how the money would be used anyway. You couldn't use it to like fund an anti-mask rally or, you know, any kind of program that had been contrary to the guidance of the CDC. And then you can't use it like for pensions and whatnot. But as far as like one program versus another program, it was pretty open. So it would be really, I think, difficult to say, you know, you didn't comply unless you didn't have things obligated by, you know, the deadline. So.
Okay. Any comments on that?
Well, just, you did receive, I mean, there was the original 600-page thing, okay, but then the rules were changed.
Right.
And you submitted a plan, and it was signed off on, I seem to recall, right? So you've got a, yes, I mean, I thought there was.
Yeah, so there was initially for a long time, there was an interim final rule that governed this. And then it did change where originally we were going to have to fill out a lot of documentation and reportage and do it quarterly. But then it was determined because it was only revenue loss and we had received less than $10 million, we didn't have to jump through all those hoops.
Okay.
So I think that might be what you're remembering.
So high likelihood somebody just sends out a scary email and
Yeah.
maybe they get 15% that, you know,
Yeah.
they wouldn't otherwise have gotten. Thank you.
All right, well, we're gonna move back up to item number 2.
Okay, this is, just wanted to bring it up to the committee for a little bit of discussion, that the city did, when or was awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, by the, Government Finance Officers Association. And just to read a little something about what that is the GFOA established the Distinguished Budget Presentation Awards program in 1984 to encourage and assist state and local governments to prepare budget documents of the very highest quality that reflect both the guidelines established by the National Advisory Council on State and Local Budgeting and the GFOA's best practices on budgeting, and then to recognize individual governments that succeed in achieving that goal. Approximately 1,800 governments, including states, cities, counties, special districts, school districts, and more have been recognized for transparency in budgeting. To earn recognition, budget documents must meet program criteria and excel as a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, and communication tool. So, and the way it works is there's an independent panel of 3 separate reviewers that work on it separately. And there's 25 criteria. Those criteria cover the introduction and overview. There's 4 for that. Financial structure, policy, and process. 6 criteria for that. 5 criteria for financial summaries. 2 for capital and debt. 4 for departmental program information. 4 for just a document-wide criteria. And we scored a 3 out of 4. We got a proficient, where 4 is outstanding. It was our first effort to be awarded this. So a 3 I'm happy with at this point, but there's still areas we did get feedback from the reviewers. So we have areas where we need to improve, which is strategies and performance measures. So that would be strategic goals and strategies and performance measures. And really what those hang on is a strategic plan. So, you know, we mentioned the strategic plan earlier. We did not include performance measures in this budget. We're planning to next time. Strategic goals, we had some department goals, but those goals weren't tied to an overall strategic plan. So in order for the document to be in alignment and the city to be in alignment with a strategic plan, everything else falls in line. And that's kind of what they're looking for. If we actually didn't have that next time around, we probably would not get the award again. And they pretty much said that. So it just points to how important a strategic plan is. for a municipality. And then that increases the transparency and accountability of the municipality as well. Because then your performance measures show, like, this is how we're pursuing the strategy, this is how we're measuring it, here's our progress, and that's communicated to the community and the public. So that was about all I had to.
Well, that's good news, and we know that you've been working hard, both of you working hard to move our financials in the right direction, and we look forward to 4.
Yeah, hopefully.
Councilmember Harris.
So we're members of GFOA, right? We pay some kind of a thing.
Yeah, we have a membership.
Are you familiar with this guy Shane? He's like a vice president of research for them. I just heard him give a speech, and they have an annual conference, and I looked at, it's 16 grand to show up in Chicago, but they are killing it. They have their material on just planning and is amazing, just amazing, and it's not worth 16,000 to me.
Well, our
But,
membership's $150.
I'm just saying that what the stuff they are thinking about, just in terms of just decision making for small cities like ours is outstanding, and I would just, whatever freebies we can get, I encourage you to look at it.
And I think in regard to this is when working on the 2024 budget, I had made a comment to someone that it was our goal to raise the budget document to a professional standard. And so this shows that we're making progress, so we're proud of that.
But we still have, but Jeff himself already has some plans for how he can continue to improve the document,
Yes.
to make it more
Yeah.
layperson
No,
friendly. But
my only, I always am just impressed. I did not know that they have this trove of stuff, so, okay, thanks.
All right.
Great.
Let's wrap this meeting up so we can move to the next one. Councilmember Harris, are you objected to adjourning? Okay, second and that. Thanks, guys, for your hard work.